Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you back to the Dynamic Decisions podcast, where we explore the strategies that drive successful decision making in the world of business. Why? Because the best decisions come from great conversations. I'm your host, Tisha Cable, and today I am joined by an urban planner who thinks about cities the way that an ecologist thinks about ecosystems, as interconnected systems that have to be designed to last. Please welcome Abraham, Economic Development Manager for the City of Pleasanton, California. Abraham, welcome to the show. I'm super glad to have you here. I got one more little thing I just want to say. You came to economic development through a really unconventional door. You earned this degree in sustainable environmental design from UC Davis. Then you built your expertise through this very deliberate climb across Northern California Public Service, West Sacramento, the City of Sacramento, the Sustainable Planning Organization, CivicWell, and the City of Brentwood. So really along the way, you've specialized in the unglamorous but decisive work of turning restrictive code and zoning into programs that actually help businesses. So I'm super excited to have you here with us today and can't wait to learn more about the work that you're doing and more about your city. So tell us more.
No, it's an amazing intro. Thank you for that. It's been an interesting journey, but definitely did not start in a conventional way whatsoever. But yeah, happy to be here. I mean, I love economic development. That's all I've ever really known. I explore the nonprofit world for a little bit, as you mentioned earlier. But yeah, and all different types of scales, different types of cities, different demographics, all those kinds of things. Just really, I'm about creating jobs, helping businesses out, but really creating community so everyone can thrive in this economy, especially during these uncertain times. But yeah, there's definitely different strategies in different cities. And I really relied on mentors, resources, networking to really, leverage my skill set and knowledge as I, implement this good work.
Fantastic. So you kind of operate on this principle that cities should use zoning to really guide what kinds of commerce are allowed and then let brokers and entrepreneurs really dictate the real demand. But the highest rent tenant isn't always the one that a community needs. Can you walk me through maybe a moment where the market wanted one thing and the community needed another thing? And how did you decide where that line was?
Well, there's different things. So I can go back to Brentwood. I was there for about 3 years, and Brentwood was known to be an agricultural town. Its roots were in agriculture, but it evolved into this thriving suburban oasis, let's call it, where a lot of people in the Inner Bay Area relocated to Brentwood. For the size of a house, you get the bigger bang for your buck, the school districts. It's a newer community that doesn't face as much infrastructure problems as the inner cities do, and all kinds of other reasons too. They wanted a small town feel. But with that came, okay, we have these houses established, these communities built and planned. Now, what kind of businesses do we want? Right? And the city had to kind of plan its way around all of that to provide the services that the residents really wanted. And along with that, there was a planned highway that was going to go through the city. So traditionally, there was a road called Brentwood Boulevard that all the development was going to be concentrated on Brentwood Boulevard. That highway was then turned into an actual freeway on the other side of town. So a lot of development that was zoned and planned for Brentwood Boulevard actually ended up going on the freeway side of things. And that's where you got your big box stores, your Walmart, your Target, your Home Depot, those big box stores that were really built in the 80s to the early 2000s. And then Brentwood Boulevard was kind of left behind. All that development went to the freeway side of things. But that I see as an area of opportunity to build more and plan more of a mixed use community. So that's what the Brentwood Boulevard specific plan did. And as an economic developer, us and my team were in charge of attracting that investment to Brentwood Boulevard that was needed to really catalyze that mixed use community that specific plan called for. And through that, we had to look at the zoning, look at different infrastructure investments that were needed to attract that level of investment. And that's exactly what we did. A shopping center was bought. We sold the city-owned property to a medical provider. So vacant commercial lot with the empty big box store that was bought by the city and then sold to this medical provider really started that level of investment. And then vacant land adjacent to that was then bought by the county to provide county services to the local region. So now you're getting a mix of different uses across the street from a lot of restaurants and retail. There was a Chipotle, a Panda that went in, a grocery outlet that went in as a result of all these different things that I just described. So it was really interesting to see how, as a city, we saw Brentwood Boulevard as this abandoned corridor to an area of opportunity.
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded answer to your question there. But
so good, but it demonstrates the cause and effect. There was intention in the design, and that's ultimately the most important decision that actually gets made is determining what is the priority of a specific intention and then using cause and effect to decide what goes next. Really, really good stuff. Let's go back to Pleasanton a little bit. You've really got remarkable anchor employers in Pleasanton. Workday alone employs over 3,500 people locally, right?
yeah,
10X Genomics just invested $30 million to expand their campus, and they're doubling down on Pleasanton as their global headquarters. So that's real strength. But the concentration could also mean fragility. So what's your honest assessment of the risk if one of those anchors downsizes or relocates? And how do you actually build a base that doesn't necessarily depend on them, even though we know that things depend on them?
that's a great question. And that's probably what I've been thinking about the last 6 months that I've been here. It's like, okay, we got past COVID. There's this major vacancy in office space. Luckily, Pleasanton is a strong office market compared to the rest of the Bay Area. We're sitting at about 12% vacancy versus the Bay Area is 20% plus in some areas, sometimes even 30 who look at Oakland. So we're sitting pretty good there. But what I think is carrying a lot of that is the life sciences, but also the professional services, like you mentioned with Workday. But I think we have relied on heavily on those big players, right? Those large corporations that employ thousands of people. But as any successful economy, you need to diversify because the day will come that one of those do leave. Hopefully I won't. It doesn't look like they will. But what I'm interested in is in attracting emerging sectors and more specifically hardware and tech. So for a long time, and especially here in the Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, we've been a software-based economy, financial services and other types of areas, also social media with like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. But now I think we're looking at more of like the robotics and the complement in AI, right? Because again, AI took off here. It's taken about 80% of the venture capital. What can we do to position Pleasanton and more specifically the Tri-Valley? Because we are neighbored by Dublin and Livermore, which have their own niches as well. But how can we position Pleasanton to be more resilient for this new wave in this economy? And I think that really comes down to positioning ourselves in the robotic space, in the medical field. Stanford did just break ground last month on an expansion of their hospital. Sutter just bought 300,000 square feet last year. We're also seeing investments in Kaiser. So we're seeing a growing area in the medical field. And then there's all these other smaller specialized medical providers, service type of companies that complement that area. So now we're diversifying from the life sciences to medical, and then we still have a strong professional services field. But now I'm more interested in advanced manufacturing. We have about, I think, 7 million square feet of manufacturing space, and that's sitting under 5% vacant right now. So how can we utilize our current real estate to really position Pleasanton to be a little bit more resilient, like I mentioned? And I'm really interested in robotics, medical device manufacturing. That's also a growing field here. But I'll briefly mention in Livermore, they're working on fusion energy. And the facility just opened this past weekend.
Oh, wow.
Right. And there's a lot of complementary type of businesses that will result off of that. And that's the clean energy future. So I'm paying close attention to clean energy as well. Because also a nuclear battery production facility also opened close to Pleasanton and Sonoma. Just, I think last week, there was the announcement or 2 weeks ago. So different areas, but again, focused on technology, obviously, but again, trying to diversify. So if we do lose somebody, it's not a big of an impact, right?
That's right. One of the other things is you've talked about reframing housing mandates as economic development tools through really value capture, right? Zoning, essentially flipping the script where cities treat housing requirements as a burden into treating them as an asset. So, in plain terms, how does that thinking change deals that you can actually structure with developers?
Funny that you asked that. So I was just reading our business climate needs survey that we did back in 2022. And a lot of it was talking about the need for housing in Pleasanton for a long time. And there's a lot of communities that were resistant towards additional housing for all kinds of legitimate reasons. But I think now the city's seeing that there are some potential benefits. And obviously with the state of California, you're almost obligated to plan for and build more housing. Not that we build the housing ourselves, but making space for housing. And there's a lot of trade-offs. But I think on the business side of things, they needed workforce housing, right? If you want those entry-level positions to live close to where they work, you need affordable rent or even an affordable home to buy. And that really is something that I think our housing strategy is starting to tackle. And we're really, I think, in our last housing element, identified sites that would be a good fit for this type of more dense housing, but at the same time, adding more single family homes to just add to the supply. Let me use an example. Vacant office building in our main business district. There's going to be two, 3-story buildings taken down, and that'll be replaced by apartments and townhomes. So a mix of rent and for sale townhomes. And you're talking about 400 to 500 different units. So that right off the bat is feeding into what the businesses were saying. You need this work for housing. It needs to be affordable. And you also need to provide the option to buy, right? A townhome as a starter home when they can build that equity and then hopefully buy in Pleasanton if they do choose to. And then there's many other projects in the pipeline that are similar to that one that will hopefully again result in either a mix of affordable rentals, townhomes, and even single family homes as well.
So it sounds like when there's a mix of things like that, there's almost like a simulation factor, right? Like I've got to really map out how I'm going to decide what that mix is and what's going to be the most appropriate for actually delivering on the outcome that I'm after. How do you go about that? What are your core inputs and how do you generally think about that simulation? Is that something you do with tools or is that something you do in a spreadsheet?
I think it involves our whole department. So economic development here in the city of Pleasanton is housed within community development.
Okay.
So a lot of that is dictated by the community development staff, which are our planners, engineers, and other folks. We even have landscape architects here. And I mention all of that because if there is a project that is going to have a major impact, we want to make sure that there are some community benefits tied to it. So sometimes that is baked into a development agreement. For example, if that project is going to have a huge demand on traffic or infrastructure or power, or there's going to be a need for a park because we want to have a decent access to parks for every resident, we take all of those into a consideration if we are going to provide some concessions, waivers, development impact fee waivers, those kinds of things. There needs to be a return back to the immediate community.
Absolutely.
Next week, there's going to be a 200 unit development project that's going to annex into the city if the city council approves it. But one of the trade-offs, and it's in the agreement, is for them to build a brand new road that'll connect the northern side of the city to the southern side of the city. And that's on our expansion. It's kind of abutting our sphere of influence and city limit. And what will that do? Open more opportunities, but will also provide the necessary infrastructure to connect those residents to different parts of the city. So there's a mutual benefit there as well for these developers, but also for the community. So that's just one clear example. And there will be a privately owned park, but it's required to be publicly accessible. So, and there's also a community facilities district formed. So given the fiscal situation, that community will pay for the maintenance, the landscaping, the lighting, and also a lot of the infrastructure improvements that will be needed in the future. And the agreement was the city will annex that area, and that'll come with the police services. It'll come with the school benefits. We have a really top performing school district. So you kind of got to negotiate, but also giving a little where it makes sense. And then again, as staff, we just provide recommendations. If there's some areas that we're not looking at, it's like, hey, maybe we can include this in the development agreement or not.
So you favor infill and compact development to really grow the tax base without adding a bunch of long-term infrastructure strain. But when you're in like an affluent, established suburb, and affluent, tomato could be, right? So like Pleasanton, density is often really what residents resist, right? We don't want this to be too many people. So when the smart long-term move collides with neighborhood pushback, how do you navigate it without either steamrolling residents or letting the project die?
I think it comes down to very thoughtful community engagement and education. But in a community like Pleasanton, people are very open-minded. We're the city of planned progress, right? That's one of our mottos. And we're also the community of character. So again, for a lot of reasons, we want to preserve how we look, how we feel, the small town feel, but also truly be a city of progress. And progress is infill. We don't have more real estate. We need to grow, because if you're not growing, it's going to kind of be hard to sustain your city financially. But you have to do that strategically and thoughtfully. And we do that through our general plan, specific plans. And those specific plan, and I'll just use the downtown for an example, is very carefully thought out so we don't mess with that historic charm that we have. We have a main street. It's literally called Main Street. It runs like 10 blocks. It has 600 businesses. It's a thriving downtown. I love it. But there is housing planned for that area. But it's been thoughtfully planned out to where it's denser and higher in the core. And as you get more into the single family areas of downtown, we kind of get reduced down. So you're not hit with this wall of a 6-story apartment building that looks like it's from 2050. The specific design guidelines are specific to a historic district. And again, you're talking 3-4 stories, then 2, then 1. So it just blends together. And you're preserving that, and you're adding, I think, it's between 500 and 1,000 units. And that, again, adds to the business, contributes to the restaurants, sales tax revenue, and just community overall. So that's just one example of how we're looking to achieve that.
Again, the level of preciseness is something that I'm admiring. So these design elements are really thought about and upfront and really heavily considered. So you've got an outcome in mind, and then sounds like you're mapping backwards towards that outcome, which I really appreciate. So
100%.
there's this other thing that I really appreciate about how you do this work. So you treat municipal government almost like a platform provider. You're always finding ways for public space and grants to really empower your private sector talent. So an example of that is the Brentwood Tech Meetup, right? Is an example. So you turned a community center into free co-working space to really anchor remote workers in the community. So that's really a different mental model than any government as a regulator type of thing. So do you decide when a city should actively build the platform versus simply get out of the way?
It's listening. It's what are people saying? What are the brokers saying? What are the business owners saying? Versus us just thinking that this is a great idea and then trying to implement it. What we heard, and I'll give kudos to my former supervisor, Ricardo Noguera, the tech meetup was his brainchild. Because he kept on hearing about these tech entrepreneurs that were former Apple employees or Google employees, moved to Brentwood for that bigger house, but now they're entrepreneurs and want to start their own tech company. They had nowhere to meet up. They had no co-working space, not enough coffee shops, and the coffee shop's too loud. The library was always full, and it was more for like students and different types of people in the community. And they're like, we just want a place to gather and share ideas and work and get out of our suburban home and just connect with others. And they didn't want to have to drive to the city to experience that. So we're like, hey, let's use our space. The city has real estate. The community center has rooms that are vacant throughout these days. And let's just give it a shot. Just offer coffee, bring basic snacks. It's very, very low budget, and just market the heck out of it and just continue to remind people. And it actually ended up being pretty successful, right? People were able to meet up, share their business ideas, pitch to each other so they can get prepared to draw investment and those kinds of things. And I was like, it proved to be pretty good. And then back to your question is when do you stay out of it? Some cities want to build their own co-working facility and operate it. Those typically don't really pencil out. Let's say WeWork has struggled in the past. I know they're kind of trying to figure it out, and there's these other models popping up, and that's from the private sector. And I've seen publicly funded ones, and again, they don't do as great. They're not as attractive, but you can run a pilot program. And then if it's a good concept in that community, that's when you introduce the private sector and you get out of the way. You just tell them, hey, we did this. There's this much demand. And then you guys can figure it out if you want to or not. But as a local government, you fund pilot programs. It's that seed funding that a lot of folks need in programs and really need to just test the waters, right? And I see it as an investment, and whether it's successful or not, you will at least explore the idea. But you don't have to see it throughout and maintain that type of activity. It's just, again, provide the grant funding, run the pilot, and then bring in the partners that can implement long-term.
So good. The outcomes focus allows you to actually create this pilot program, because the outcome is either I have something successful that I can hand over and then a private company can successfully do it with a model that's proven to work, or it's an experiment that we can get some additional key learnings for as we continue down this path. So by being focused, it allows you to pinpoint these projects and initiatives that you can determine whether they work and how you want to fund them. So awesome. So you have this thing where you said data-driven economic development doesn't require a big budget, just really cross-department collaboration. So for a lot of cities that right now assume that they can't compete without money for like super fancy big enterprise tools or super fancy very expensive consultants, what does that collaboration actually look like day to day? What's the first thing that a resource-strapped city should try to do differently?
That's a great question. And it really comes down to knowing what you already have. It's like having this toolbox and you have it all in there, but it's buried under everything. And you go to the store and buy this new fancy tool later to learn that it was already there. Yeah. You already passed the 30 days and you can't return it. So now, now you're doubling down. But, besides that analogy, it's exactly what I started to do now is when I come into a new city, what do we have? What might we have that we don't know about as an economic development team? Because we're such a small team. It's usually 2, 3, 4, 5 people, depending on the size city, sometimes 1. So you might not be aware. And what it comes down to is look at your community development department, look at your planning department, look at Parks and Rec. Everyone is subscribed to something. And typically now, depending on the model, you can just piggyback or you can borrow. And if it's something that nobody has, what I've started to do, and I did it in Brentwood, is, hey, I found this tool. It's very expensive for just my department to take on, but I know it'll benefit others. So can others pitch in? Because that's exactly what I did to get foot traffic data in Brentwood to gauge how successful our community engagement events were that were funded by the Economic Development Grant Program. But what PD needed to know was how many people were going to attend. That way they can staff it appropriately to make sure it was a safe event. And Parks and Rec wanted to see kind of the wear and tear on the park, and then also visitation of that different parks to see which parks were getting more foot traffic than others. So what did I do? Hey, PD, can you pitch in? Parks and Rec, can you pitch in? And then I think we also were able to get some community development through traffic to get traffic counts a little bit more accurate. And again, foot traffic at different shopping centers and whatnot. So between the 4 departments, they all pitched in and we were able to get the tool. So that's one example. And then jumping here to Pleasanton, GIS is usually your best friend. GIS has so much data, and GIS usually offers Esri Business Analyst if you're more interested in that. But what I did here in Pleasanton is, I know we have GIS, we have a GIS team. I really want to build an interactive map and a business directory for either site selection to help businesses look at vacant spaces, or what was the other one? The directory to just display what types of businesses there are.
Sure.
You don't need to pay for a fancy mapping tool. You don't need to pay a consultant. You already have it, and you can likely embed that map on your city website. So what I did is I collaborated with the GIS, and all I did was upload our business license list, and we were able to map it out. And then for our vacant sites, same thing. I have a little bit of GIS knowledge, and then I leveraged, the actual experts in the GIS team to build this interactive map for the site to be a site selection tool. And that right off the bat can save you anywhere, again, depends on your tool, $10,000 to $20,000 a year. And you're just using the tools that are already there. So it's just be curious and start with your IT department, because they're the ones who know. They're the ones who usually approve these tools, enterprise, all those kinds of things. So if you don't know where to start, it's probably your IT department.
So good. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We are now going to explore your decision-making style through a persona assessment. So I'm going to offer you 4 different ways of framing a decision. And after each one, you're going to tell me how much that framing matches how you decide. You're going to have a scale from 0 to 100%. But here's the thing, you only get 100% total across all 4.
Okay.
And I give them to you one at a time.
Okay.
Okay. So the first one is called the feeler. It's a values-driven leader. So this persona prioritizes alignment with values and mission, weighing the human impact and cultural alongside of the metrics. So here's your question. When I'm shaping a development deal or designing a grant program in one of the wealthiest cities in California, I ask myself, beyond the tax base and the marquee tenants, does this make room for the small operators and people who can't afford top dollar rent? You've spent real energy lifting up micro businesses and remote workers. So when you're serving high earners and serving everyone else, it might pull in a different direction. How much weight do you give to keeping the place accessible? So, Abraham, how much does that approaching decisions that way resonate with you?
And this is for the feeler, right?
This is the feeler. Yes.
And I can is it by percentage?
By percentage. So you get 100% total across 4 questions.
Yeah. For this one, I'd say about 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give me a little why. Tell me a little bit.
I think a lot of things with this specific question require hard facts, right? But at the same time, you can't only rely on that. You just have to know your community. What are people saying? What's the sentiment to inform your decision? But when it comes to rents, grants, allocating dollars, resources, you really just have to have a lot of that, a lot of the facts. It can't be based off of feelings.
So good. Okay, here we go. Here's the next one. It's called the planner. This is the strategic visionary. This persona focuses on long-term implications and second and third order effects across multiple scenarios. So when I make a call today about zoning or incentives, I ask myself, am I building resilience for whichever future actually shows up? Or am I leaning on anchors in a market that could turn? Pleasanton looks strong now with 10x Genomics expanding and Workday deeply entrenched, but you're already watching federal opportunity zone policy shifts that changing demand patterns, right? If a major employer contracts or the market cools, does today's strategy hold up? Or does it expose how concentrated the base really is? So how much does that forward-looking scenario planning framing match how you decide?
I would say 20%.
Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of it is modeling, looking at historical trends. Even through COVID, which changed a lot of things have proven to be very similar. And who knows what will happen here with like the AI bubble, whether it's a bubble or not. We can look at the .com bubble as an example. How can we plan according to that? Can we assume that a similar bubble will pop? And how can we prevent ourselves from making the same mistakes, right? It's putting all your eggs in that one basket. It's just prepare for that. But again, the market will do what it does. And that's why you don't have anyone that has figured it out. It's very unpredictable. It's very volatile sometimes, especially right now. But again, that's why it's just 20%, because you don't want to commit 60% to it, right?
Yeah.
It's just 20%, I think, is a good one to put on that one.
Cool. All right, here's your next one. It's called The Counter. It's a challenger of assumptions. So this persona questions conventional wisdom and looks for contrarian opportunities. So when evaluating a development opportunity, I ask myself, is my default instinct to let the market decide actually right here? Or are there times a city has to intervene to protect a corridor's character or its community, serving uses, even at the cost of revenue? So, your stated philosophy is to use zoning to set boundaries and then let the market dictate demand. But where have you found that the hands off principle reaches its limit? What does the profession accept without questioning that you've had to push back on it? So, Abraham, how much does that assumption challenging style resonate with how you decide?
Quite a bit, actually. I'm a non-traditionalist, as you've seen in my journey, even down to my college major. I've never just, the one thing I hate is like, that's how we've always done it. Or that's how the rule book says, right? That's what the manual says. So I really like to counter things. I really like to pick them apart, identify flaws. And if there's
Mhm,
something, if there's a new approach to something, I think we need to take the risk and give it a shot. Back to like the pilot program that I gave you to the
mhm,
the grants that I've awarded across the years. This sounds like a crazy idea. It doesn't make sense, but lo and behold, you give it a chance. There's a lot of benefits to taking that risk, more often than not. So I
mhm,
would definitely give a lot more to this one than the rest. Uh,
mhm.
Probably 30% to
Okay.
35%.
We got to pick one, 30 or 35.
Give it 35.
All right. Okay. Here we are. Here's the last one. And I have a strong suspicion it's going to resonate with you. So, this one is called the data driver. It's an evidence based decision maker. So, this persona relies on metrics and concrete evidence, preferring proof over intuition. So, when committing to a strategic direction, I ask myself, what does the evidence actually say? Not what do I want it to say? But if you value data, a data backed strategy over speculative pitches, and you focus on measurable risk and long term asset life stability. But the other half of your work is placemaking. So the trust, vibrancy, and the sense of place that draws people in. Those signals don't really fit cleanly into a spreadsheet. So, how do you balance the rigor you insist on with the qualitative factors that often decide whether a place actually works? Okay, so how much does that data driven and evidence focused framing match how you make your strategic decisions?
I think it was fate, and that's why I think it gives me the 20% that I would give to it. I think you have to look at your numbers. Money doesn't lie. So if a
Mhm,
project doesn't pencil, unfortunately, it doesn't pencil. And it's hard to hear that, especially with projects that are going to have a big impact.
mhm,
If it doesn't, like if a mixed use project doesn't pencil, there's no reason why you should continue pursuing it. But at the same time, looking at the counter, right? It's looking at public art projects. It's looking at that placemaking. It's
mhm,
looking at, for example, concerts in the park. You don't have a massive impact on sales tax revenue, but it really builds community. So I know it does have a huge return, and it's usually why the city funds it and not a private entity, but there's just a big return on that for the community. That's not necessarily the financial. But again, that's why 20% of it does have to be based in fact. What kind of return are you going to get? Is it financially sustainable? But at the same time is looking at the things that aren't really going to return your investment, if that makes
mhm.
sense.
Absolutely. Thank you for participating in that with me. I always find these fun and a
Yeah.
great way, to think about it. So kind of as we wrap up here, really, you've worked across, small cities and then a city like Pleasanton, which has a very unique vibe, right, in the country. You're always pushing stuck initiatives past the finish line. So if you could give one piece of advice to an economic developer who's trying to build a resilient local economy, but who may have limited resources, what would it be?
I think invest in building skills. Don't be afraid to take on new courses. A lot of the things you actually want to do in house, if you're, resource constrained. And it's the reason why you're probably an economic developer. You like all kinds of things. You like being creative. You like doing business. You like planning maybe. And maybe if you don't like an area. But if you are interested in something, I think is really taking the time to train yourself, educate yourself, learn how to use tools so you can really empower yourself to implement projects. But at the same time, understanding you might need to leverage other people's talents and resources. And that's why you have to, again, look internally, similar to one of your questions about the software and maybe not having to buy these things. Talk to other departments. You can build the team to break those silos within your own city to implement these projects successfully. Don't be afraid to knock on people's doors, barge in the room, whatever. That's what we do anyway.
That's right.
But do it, thoughtfully to really help yourself grow, learn, break down these barriers. But I would start definitely by building your skill set, getting creative, educating and training yourself, no matter how many years you have under your belt.
Yeah.
A dog can learn new tricks. An old dog can learn new tricks.
So good. Thank you so much, Abraham, for being here and for sharing your insights and your thoughts. Would you tell the audience where they can learn more about you and more about the City of Pleasanton?
Yeah, please do follow me on LinkedIn. I try and post as much as possible. But also if you're on Instagram, follow in Pleasanton. We manage that account and that'll give you a flavor of what it's like to live in Pleasanton, all the events, those kinds of things. But we also do business spotlights on that.
Fantastic.
So you're really plugged in the community. But if you want to see things from my perspective, definitely follow me on LinkedIn.
Yay. And for our listeners who are in economic development, urban planning, commercial real estate, or municipal leadership, you can connect with Abraham, like he just said, on LinkedIn too. So do that for sure. And for our listeners, thank you again for tuning in. Remember, the best decisions come from great conversations. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe it, rate it, share it with your network. And please, let's keep these conversations going on social media using Dynamic Decisions podcasts. And until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep leading with purpose.